So, Eric, when you think of 1998, what do you think of? Because this is what I think of, what we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. That's about it.
I did not have. You do a better Bill Clinton than I did. I do very bad accents. Everybody knows that who listens to the pod or is my friend. It actually says in my theater resume, very bad / comedic accents, like under special skills. But yes, we are talking about Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. As I have said before, and as I always say ad nauseum, I was studying abroad in London when this really broke in January of 98. And let me tell you, we all know how the British press is. Obviously, for a lot of reasons that we're not going to get into. It's not a royal podcast, but they had a fucking field day with this whole thing.
I'm sure.
It not even just because it was about sex or it was about power or whatever, but because, they love to see Americans embarrass themselves. And this was.
Well, yeah. And wasn't this after Tampon Gate? So they had a lot of reason to feel a little schadenfreude at our expense this time, They
were like foaming at the mouth. But yes.
Chuck wanted to be Camilla's tampon, but he never splooged all over her blue dress, which she kept. So that's a whole.
Yes. So if you have lived under a rock and or were not born in 1998, please don't tell me if you were not born in 1998. We are talking about the Bill Clinton scandal and impeachment. So,
okay, Allie, I hate to burst your bubble, but if you weren't born in 1998, it means you're 24.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, sorry. This is where we do 25-year-old movies. So 1998, this is a silver anniversary.
Well, anyway, to all my tweens who are watching this, love you guys. Gen Z loves me. That's how I keep myself young. So, Bill Clinton did not have sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky, except he absolutely 100% did. On December 19th of 1998, obviously we know impeachment proceedings began, perjury, obstruction of justice, abuse of power. President Clinton was eventually acquitted. I mean, really, I watched just in the last 3 months, I watched the American Crime Story impeachment with Beanie Feldstein as Lewinsky and Sarah Paulson as Tripp. And I listened to if you haven't listened to the Slow Burn about it, you definitely should podcast. I feel bad for Monica Lewinsky. I think, obviously in that era of the late 20s and the aughts, women were very misaligned. I put myself, I was her age. I was a little bit younger in 98, but I sort of put myself in her shoes. I don't know if I was attracted to the president and he wanted to make out with me, I probably would have made out with him,
He was the most powerful person literally in the entire world. And anybody who in 2023 blames anything on Monica Lewinsky just hates women full stop. I mean, that's the only, and have you seen Monica Lewinsky's TED Talk?
No.
If you have not, it is brilliant. It is really, really great. And she basically, she starts off with this really funny joke that I won't ruin, but she basically says, I think she's right, she was really the first worldwide victim of cyberbullying because social media was brand new at the time. She was on a suicide watch for most of 1998.
Oh, I mean.
It was rough. And she didn't deserve that. And she still does. And I think that she's come through in a way that you can only admire. She's got a real sense of humor about the whole thing. And yes, she does bring it up sometimes to tell a joke on herself. And everyone's like, it was 25 years ago. Get over it. And she's like, why should she? The world will never let her get over it.
No, I mean,
she's just gonna, so she produced a TV show about it. Good for her. Get that money, Monica, because we put you through hell. So I'm a big fan. I mean, I think you can absolutely be a big fan of Hillary Clinton and Monica Lewinsky at the same time. Neither one of them is ever going to meet me for lunch, so I can like both of them, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive to me. I obviously voted for Hillary Clinton. I'm a big Hillary Clinton
As did Monica Lewinsky, by the way, publicly.
So, I'm glad she's a writer. She's obviously anti-bullying activist. I think all of that is awesome. And yeah, I mean, I think about myself and you sort of wonder, where would I have gone? And they sort of allude to that in the American Crime Story that this is what you're going to be. You're going to be Monica Lewinsky for the rest of your life, and all of the things that come with that name. So,
and I personally think she's awesome. So there.
Get on it. Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, Rent,
or bi? Stay tuned and find out.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the Rewind Project. My name is Eric.
I'm Allie.
And Matt is not with us this week. He had some family events to attend, but we're so pleased that in his stead, we are happy to welcome Adam Palcher. Hey, Adam.
Hey, thanks so much for having me back, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yay!
Absolutely, yes. Back because Adam was with us in our little preseason, we call it the drinking game, even though we always do it like first thing in the morning and no one drinks. But, we think we're cool when we say that, when we pitched all of our movies. So Adam was here when we pitched this one, and he was really great about stepping in kind of at the last minute. And I discovered, I didn't discover you, but I personally discovered your podcast when I was looking around for more information about some movies that we were talking about last season. 12 Angry Men, you did a video on it, and we were about to do a podcast on it. And I just immediately fell down a rabbit hole and watched a whole bunch of your stuff. Also, I have to say again, your Pedro Almodovar little film festival. Cruise through that whole thing because he's awesome. So you've got a podcast called The Deep Dive Film School. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So me and my partner, Adam, another Adam, very cute. We started podcasting back in 2007. And we didn't really know what it was.
West of podcasting.
We didn't really know what we did. Unfortunately, we picked up some bad habits and never corrected them. And so a handful of years ago, we decided to kind of rebrand as Deep Dive Film School and make it a YouTube channel as well. But we do festivals like you're talking about, whether it's director or genre or actor related. We kind of mix it up. We're coming up on a food festival, so we're going to do movies about food. That's our forgotten gem as Big Nights. That is a completely underrated movie that is wonderful. So we got a variety of things that we do. We also do scene breakdowns as well. So every other week we do a different scene from a movie. We just did I think we just did Eastern Promises and Jaws. We did a couple scenes.
I love Eastern Promises. Underrated, totally underrated movie.
Yeah, we did the naked Vigo, the naked shower fight with Vigo.
Obviously.
I mean, that's the scene, right?
That is the quintessential scene in that movie. Yeah. Aside from the fact that Viggo Mortensen is hot. I love that movie. Too. I saw that movie in the theater.
It's Cronenberg too, which is, we kind of get into it when we break it down. Yeah. It's an interesting era for Cronenberg as well. So, but really appreciate this movie, or appreciate you guys having me on. I'm excited to talk about this movie. I graduated high school in 1998. So, I actually saw this in the theater. I remember seeing it and leaving the theater going, whoa.
I was 27 in 1998. So I hate you both. Let's start there. We are talking this week about Out of Sight, which, first of all, let me just say, terrible title. Awful. Doesn't tell you anything about this movie. It's a stupid cliche that just doesn't,
It's
live.
A book title, right?
Yeah. They took it. It was based on the novel, also called Out of Sight, by Elmore Leonard.
I usually have those issues. I'm usually the one bitching about those things. It doesn't bother me.
Well, it's a nothing title. I mean, it's not offensive. It's just that there's nothing there. And it doesn't tell you anything about anything. No one. Anyway, dumb. And they had just made a movie based on an Elmore Leonard novel the year before and changed the title because he's not very good with titles. So, anyway, dumb. This was directed by Steven Soderbergh.
Clearly.
I saw Sex, Lies, and Videotape in the theater because I was that guy who went to the little art house theater all the time and watched these little indie movies that were shot on some kind of Super 8 camera. This was his attempt to get out of the indie art world and just make a mainstream movie. And it just feels like right out of Sid Field, right? I mean, all the plot points are there. It's a really just solid movie. It's not, and it's a fun movie. And it's not, I don't think there's anything incredibly deep about it. It's just super sexy and fun.
I'm saying that here in 2023, I saw Megan. It was awesome because you know why? It was a fun movie and I didn't have to think about it. And I didn't have to worry about the deeper implications of whatever I was watching. And it was a delight. So yes, these kinds of movies have their places too, where it's just a fun ass, talented cast movie.
For sure. I always say this because it's true. Sometimes you just got to see The Rock save the world, you know? Like
Right.
sometimes you just need sometimes you just need some dumb fun that doesn't have some deep meaning. It's just super fun. There's nothing around it. I love this movie. This movie is kind of, this is not only Clooney and Jennifer Lopez in their prime. They're really big.
Debatable. They're still smoking hot, both of them. Like,
yeah, absolutely. They really don't look that much different than they do 24 years later, and it's pretty wild to think about. But this really came up in the era of the cool criminal movie, right? As someone who was truly affected by like stuff like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, seeing this come out, I think stuff like Usual Suspects and Natural Born Killers and True Romance, even stuff like Fight Club and Train Spotting were kind of in this era, right? And so it was like reflecting on the dialogue and how cool it can be to be a criminal. So, but it also at least at that point, as that appealed to me. And so I loved this movie. I love the style of it. Obviously, it's riffing off of the more of the Pulp Fiction side of things a little bit, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the tie-ins they have there. But it's also, I think, a great Soderbergh era. I mean, if you look at his block of sections of his filmography, after this, he did Traffic, Ocean's 11, and Aaron Brockovich, which are probably out of his filmography, depending on what you're into. That's probably got at least 3 of his strongest movies in there. But yeah, anyways, I thought this is a great era for a lot of things going on in this movie. Plus it's just kind of, like you said, an ensemble caper film, for the most part. So.
And the only thing I would say is that it is fun. It's fun. It's just 100% fun. I wouldn't necessarily, I don't know that you were saying this about this movie because you were more talking about The Rock saving the world, but it's not dumb fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, there's this very smart movie and it's put together in a really clever way.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there to appreciate, but it's not showing off, anything other than, I mean, some of the things, I thought all the freeze frames were pretty cool. They were used well. Like you can stop and appreciate some of those little flourishes. I second time watching it, because I did watch this twice. I was just telling Allie and Adam before we started recording, I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about this season. So I watched it late last year to kind of check it out, and I loved it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely want to talk about this movie. And then I watched it again, and you always watch it a little differently when you know you're going to be talking about it. The lead up to the sex scene where they start doing time jumps, like them getting undressed while you're still listening to the banter of them at the bar before they got up to the hotel room, and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I didn't even really notice that when I was watching it the first time because I was just having a great time. But that was actually really clever and really sexy. I mean, it really amped up the sexual tension. So you could kind of see them, playfully undressing while you're hearing all the dialogue that led up to this only 10 minutes before. So all that stuff was just really, really cool. Anyway, Scott Frank, really dependable screenwriter, wrote this based on the novel Out of Sight by Elmore Leonard. Later on, this was kind of spun off into a TV show. Karen Sisko got her own TV show, and Carla Gugino, who I really like as an actor, played Karen.
I did not put the 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But basically, this was the story that led to that. I never watched it, but those things all together, actress and name, and all sounds great, and I probably would have loved it. But who knows? Haven't seen it, and it didn't stick around, but Apple TV Plus, Netflix, we're looking for something to reboot. Why not that? Why not reboot something that didn't work and make it better and, make it alive? Anyway, notable achievements for Out of Sight. There were 2 Oscar nominations, one for Best Adapted Screenplay. Can't argue.
No.
Solid work. And one for Best Editing. Again, all those cute little, freeze frames and fade outs and, devices, but well used. And I don't think that they distracted from the movie being told at all.
The freeze frame thing is so 90s. It's pretty
Totally.
funny. I've kind of forgot that part was in there. It works, but it's also a little lazy. But I kind of get where he's going from. But I agree with you. That scene in the bar that's why it won Best Editing. I think the editing there and mixing it in with them flirting, and then you see, what's going to happen. I mean, it's been building up for the whole movie, but it's probably the most solid scene in the movie.
Yeah, I mean the bar with the snow falling in the background and the banter, that and the trunk, are the two things that I still remembered. 25 years later, I was like, oh yeah, the sexy movie where they're in the trunk.
I have never seen this movie before. This is my first time. I'm an out-of-sight virgin, and but I did know, the only thing I knew about it was that there was a trunk scene. And I didn't realize that it was so much at the beginning. I don't know why, but I was sort of waiting for that. But that is literally the only thing about this movie. I knew nothing else.
No,
I waited 25 years, no spoilers. It was great.
Yeah, that was the big meet cute where they're locked in a trunk together.
So what did you think, Allie?
Well, I don't want to scoop myself at the end, but I thought it was perfectly enjoyable. And what really struck me, especially looking at the list that we're going to talk about, is that with the exception of Isaiah Washington, who is now canceled, every single person on this cast list is still relevant 25 years later. Like, that's insane to have that kind of and we could keep going with this cast list, and just the fact that all of them are working, all of them are doing great things, it's amazing. I think.
And some of them were not nearly the figures they are today when this was being made. So, we've kind of gotten into it, but plot. This is a movie about two sexy people. One of them is a bank robber. One of them is a federal U.S. Marshal who find themselves obviously on the opposite sides of the law, but they're also falling for each other. We're going to talk a little bit about whether or not the love story is maybe what Soderbergh and Clooney and Lopez thought it was, and if it even matters. But first, let's get into this absolutely stacked cast. Obviously, above the line was George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez as Jack Foley and Karen Sisko. Let's talk about Clooney. I mean,
Clooney's got a cloon, right?
He's a crooner.
He's a crooner. Yeah. He's crooning all over the place. I mean, I actually think that, aesthetically, as your Hot News correspondent, I think I prefer zaddy George Clooney of the last few years. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the absolute charisma that oozes off of his extremely toned body, it's just insane. He can just. It's obviously he started on Roseanne. I like to watch old school Roseanne sometimes. And, even on that, just like a crook of his smile, just a little bit. And you're like, it's amazing.
I even remember seeing him on Wonder Years, if you can believe that. He was super young. It was one of his first roles. He dated the daughter in Wonder Years.
He did?
Yeah. That was
I was
one
obsessed
of his
with that
first
show.
roles.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Go back and Google George Clooney Wonder Years. You'll see it. He's got a full head of hair.
Oh, I love it.
Well, one of the reasons I think that he has still smoking hot in 2023, he was giving me zaddy energy back in 1998. I mean, there was always something about him that was a little world weary, that was just a little kind of, this knowing glint in his eye. He had that kind of weathered, way about him that always really worked. And of course, he became a sex symbol on ER with that Caesar cut, that was everywhere in the early 90s, which, looked good on him and very few other people.
I was just saying, no one else.
He also became famous. He's had gray hair his whole career of being famous, right? He became famous when he was older. And I think there's something to someone like that, even someone like a John Hamm or somebody who kind of started acting later in their life and didn't really know what they wanted and became famous when they were that zaddy, right?
Yeah. And so, it's just, it's all over. But he's so cool, even when he's kind of uncool. The trunk scene when they start, for whatever reason, going over Faye Dunaway's 70s filmography, bizarrely. But like, and he totally misquotes Network. I don't remember what he says.
It's adorable.
But it's so goofy. Like, it's goofy, and he's kind of like, all of a sudden he's not the smartest bank robber in the world, but it's still like, God, he's so irresistible. I mean,
I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take any more of your shit.
That's what he said. And it was just like, and he was loving it. He was having such a good time. And then she kind of cracked a smile. And for me, that was the moment. If you didn't see it coming already, you were like, oh, she's into him. Because she was rightfully, and of course, a little annoyed about being thrown into the trunk of her own car and being driven somewhere by a criminal she didn't want to go.
She's cool too.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's something that's that doesn't get spoken about. She's cool as hell as well. She keeps calm in that backseat. I know she's a federal agent and everything, but like, she's just as cool as he is. And I think, which is why it works. But
yeah. And that moment where he says, "You're not very scared." And she says, "Of course I am." But in a way that still doesn't betray a lot of fear. But at the same time, I looked at her in that close up and I was like, I believe her. She is scared. But she's also holding it together because she's trained and she's doing what she does. I have to say, now that we're on the topic of Jennifer Lopez, we've moved. Clooney will come up again, obviously. But we're talking about Lopez. In 1998, she was an actress. She had not yet cut an album. She was not Jenny from the Block yet. And in fact, a lot of people, when she said, she told a couple people on the set of this movie that she was about to cut her first album, and they were going, "Oh God, don't do it. That's so embarrassing. Like, it never works. And you always look like this desperate movie star who wants to be a pop star." And 10 years after this, she was basically a musician that used to make movies. Mm-hmm. And now she's just kind of coming back into, and people, I think Hustlers really made people go, "Oh, she's a good actor." I mean, but you forget a little bit. I forgot. She's really good.
Yeah, I think her breakout role where she became super famous was it Selena?
Selena, yeah.
Yeah, that was the big one. But this is the first movie where I was like, oh shit, she can act. Like, she is awesome. And she went on to make a bunch of rom-coms and kind of forgettable movies after that. Just kind of became like a victim of kind of being thrown into those movies. The only other thing I think is closely equal to this is Oliver Stone's U-Turn. She is in that movie, and she is equally as good as she is here in that one. But since this movie and since U-Turn, I haven't really seen her have just an amazing performance that I know she's capable of. So
she's really good in Hustlers.
Awesome in Hustlers, yeah.
She deserved an Oscar nom.
I was pissed off.
I haven't seen that.
Oh yeah, she's really good.
She's cool. She's cool as hell. Like, she has this charisma, this thing that you cannot teach. And yet she's also, there's a really good performance in there. She's kind of like mother hen to a group of female criminals who are basically exotic dancers who are, scamming their customers on the side, who totally, by the way, deserve it. I mean, it's a 100% men are trash film. It's great.
Hashtag patriarchy.
It's great. And she's great in it. And when she wasn't nominated for an Oscar, I was legit pissed off.
Yeah, she should have been. There's one scene, I don't want to ruin it for you, but there's one scene that involves Usher, the musician, and it like changes the tenor of the whole movie. It's like the before Usher scene and the after Usher scene, and she's just so good. And I mean, obviously she's beautiful and gorgeous, and she's wearing these like mink leopard print coats.
She's decked out.
Yeah, like the whole scene. So
she's awesome. She's very, very good in this. And again, it's not Ibsen, right? But Karen Sisco is a cool chick, and she is so cool. And George Clooney talked about her audition and said when she came in, she said it was her one experience with the casting couch because she met at George Clooney's house and Steven Soderbergh was there. And they did the trunk scene for her audition, and they were actually spooning on his couch.
Oh my
and she said, that was my one casting couch experience. But, that was the scene, right? I mean, and that was and Steven Soderbergh knew he needed someone who could do that scene and sell it to make the whole movie work. But she's so good because she's both sexy and really, really smart and really together, and just what a performance. Let's move on to this amazing supporting cast. Ving Rhames as Buddy the bank robber with a big heart and a guilty conscience.
And a religious sister. I love Ving Rhames, always and forever. I did not know he was in this movie, and when he popped up, I was actually, I will say that other than George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez and Steve Zahn, I knew none of these people were in the movie, and so I was texting the boys last night, and I was like, wait, this person's in it, and Albert Brooks and Viola, and like I was just
There's some nice surprises in here. Michael Keaton's in here as well.
Yeah.
Luis Guzman.
I know,
Yes.
I love them.
They're all amazing, and but I love
Keener.
Buddy. I love the way that Buddy is introduced. I love the whole, like, he's trying to break into somebody's car, and then he just does the whole, let me help you with those, ma'am. Well, don't expect a tip.
I'll just take your car.
Yeah, so cool. Really, really great. And you meet him just before you get into the flashbacks, where you kind of understand his relationship with Jack. Speaking of, Steven Soderbergh, again, just really wanted to make a very straightforward film, didn't want to be known as the art film guy, wanted to tell this story sequentially.
Oh.
So it was his initial idea that they would cut it, and the very first scene would be George and Buddy, Jack Foley and Buddy, in the first prison, and just do the whole setup with Albert Brooks and Don Cheadle and that whole thing.
Is that how the book is?
Yes, and that's how they did the book. And so he was like, that's cool, but let's do it this way. And it didn't work as well. Like, Elmore Leonard knew what he was doing when he structured this whole thing and put it all together.
Well, that's one nod to Pulp Fiction, right? Telling things out of order and starting in the middle of the movie, right? I think that's one thing that you can, like, that was popular at that time, right? And like, no, let's mix it up. Let's cut it up and throw it up in the air and see where it lands.
Although in Pulp Fiction, still you notice it. It's wacky the way that they bop around in time all the time. This one just felt right? 2 years ago. Okay, let's get a little backstory. And then it does go back and forth a couple times, but, just the costuming. It's like, okay, at this jail we wear yellow, and at this jail we wear blue. And I was never confused about where we were, ever. You don't have to think about it too much. Whereas in Pulp Fiction, John Travolta shows up at the end. You're like, wait a minute, aren't you dead on a toilet somewhere? Oh, right. Okay. What? And you really have to kind of, invest yourself mentally. Whereas here, I was just along for the ride.
I mean, one of my favorite things about Ving Rhames is his relationship with George Clooney in the movie, and just the Jack Foley Buddy brag, and how, he's sort of the conscience and Jack Foley is sort of the impulsive one, and they're besties and they're boys. I don't know. I liked how that kind of played out.
Yeah.
And I like that at the end, Ving Rhames was the one literally holding the bag.
Yes, and it's left with this kind of open ending that we'll talk about in a bit. But because Ving Rhames is, by the way, people, if you're new to the Rewind Project, you've had 25 years to watch this movie. We're going to spoil the shit out of it. So turn us off and watch the movie now if you don't want your spoilers. But the fact that Buddy is in the back of that cab with a bag full of uncut diamonds does give you some hope. Does give you some hope, right? That, Jack's going to make it out of his current mess with a little bit of help from J-Lo, maybe. And
now he can postpone. Now he can escape and go meet Ving in Cayman Islands or wherever.
Yeah, they'll be next door neighbors to, Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman on whatever island they ended up on at the end of Shawshank. Sure. Okay. The bad guy of this whole Mishigas is Don Cheadle, who I don't think Don Cheadle was Don fucking Cheadle back in 1998. I think this was a definitely part of his rise in the movies. I didn't look up his filmography to make sure.
I do remember watching Soderbergh being interviewed for this movie, and he said, if you can get Don Cheadle in your fucking movie, you get Don Cheadle in your fucking movie.
Yes.
So obviously, yes.
So I think he did have some clout at that time.
Okay, well, but this is a really dependable, always. He's always going to do a good job.
Love him so much.
It's so funny because I'm about to say the opposite about somebody in just a moment, but I don't see Don Cheadle as the really scary bad guy very often, and the fact that he just does it, and he does it so well that I was like, why don't I see him as the big scary bad guy more often? Because he's fucking scary. And yet most of the time he's this really just totally likable guy. with a big heart and whatever. I mean, he can play all of that stuff, but he does it so well. That scene where he, shivs the guy who he just threw a fight to was like, again, it's a small thing, but it's just like moving, stab, keep walking. I mean, it's just like, what the fuck? Just, oh my God. Yeah, I was like jumping up and down while that shit was going down.
Maybe I watched too many prison movies because I saw where that was going. I was like,
oh yeah. I mean, you totally see it coming, but just the way that he does it without even looking to the side. He wasn't even looking to see where that knife was going. It was just boom, 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 and we're walking. Yeah.
I think he probably gets billed as maybe an everyman because he can do everything.
Yeah.
But he's a character actor, and he envelops Snoopy here in this movie, and I love that he's got his own agenda, right? He doesn't give a shit. He's always stealing and scamming, and we get introduced to his crew in the second half of the movie when they go to Detroit, and you see like White Boy Bob and like the people that he has under him and everything. And anyways, it's quite a ride, and he's great as Snoopy.
Amazing, so great. Also, somebody who I just love, who is just, I don't think is appreciated as much as he should be because he's always so good, is Steve Zahn as the derpiest criminal you've ever met in your entire life.
The derpiest derp that
Glenn
ever
Michaels.
And I just, he's so good at those doofy characters. And even on White Lotus, which is his most recent foray, he's still kind of derpy in like a rich white sort of way. You just wanted to shake him, but like you're also kind of charmed by him. It's very confusing.
And I, weirdly, I still, even though you have no respect for this guy, his very last scene is with J-Lo in the car where she's like, you know what, just run, just run. Really? I really felt bad for him. The car wouldn't start, and here's this cop, and oh man, I just wanted to get out of here. And it's so funny that he thought he was the mastermind of this whole thing, and everyone just takes it away from him. By the time you get to the end and they're actually doing the big bust up, he is nowhere to be found because he's not smart enough to keep up with all these people.
Yeah, he's not the mastermind of anything. No. He just overheard something. Yeah, he plays, he grew into kind of the derpy dad, and has grown into that, and he does that very well. But yeah, he's always been funny. He is always, and this is one of my favorite roles of his, the sunglasses, just some of the stuff he wears.
That headband.
That handlebar mustache.
The mustache, just always high. I think he's just awesome. He's just he's such an opposite to Clooney that, Clooney's so cool. And that's why Clooney hates him so much, because he knows, but he's got the score and they follow him through the whole movie. So he's got some kind of credibility, but it definitely plays opposite of Clooney, and it works really well.
Yeah, and we talked about his film debut, I believe, a little while ago when we discussed Reality Bites. He showed up for the very first time, I think, in that movie as the really underused gay best friend who had like one great sequence, and the rest of the time he was just kind of there. But God, was he funny.
Another movie that he was in with Mark Ruffalo, neither of them were famous at this time, called Safe Men. It's a ridiculous comedy, but I believe was him and Mark Ruffalo, totally silly 90s comedy that got pushed under the rug. But if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about.
Huh. All right.
Yeah. Anyway.
One to look up. It's the way we bring smart people onto this show.
For sure.
Okay, next up, and we're not even halfway through this cast, folks. Albert Brooks as Richard Ripley.
I love Albert Brooks so much. That's all.
He's amazing. You could see how Soderbergh fell into doing Ocean's 11, right? with these big ensemble casts.
Yeah.
And he got comfortable working with it. But yeah, he's amazing in it. Absolutely. And his toupee, everything.
Oh my God. Well, and I like to watch these on Prime because I use the X-ray. So, cause I pause and I can see like who these people are. And I didn't even recognize him at first cause I'm so used to his like curly Jew-fro. I'm a Jew. I can say that. But, so I didn't even recognize him at first. And then I like looked at the X-ray and then I looked at him and I was like, oh shit, that's Albert Brooks, which Defending Your Life is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, and I will always, broadcast news made him a god
yes,
for me as well. I mean, that flop sweat scene is just like the best. But yeah, I mean, he's just so out of his element here, right? I mean, completely outclassed and outcooled by everybody. And, the best moment of the whole thing that I think really expressed that for me, well, two things. I mean, one, he wouldn't leave Midge, which, you know what? Good for him. Like, he's going to die for Midge because he loves Midge.
Sure.
Okay. I believed it. It was like, okay, it was his one kind of noble moment.
Yeah.
But as soon as, George Clooney said, I don't know what I'm excited about more, is just being here with you or seeing those uncut diamonds on the bottom of your fish tank. And it was like, oh, fuck. Like, it just, and it was such a great setup because it didn't feel like an info dump an hour before when George Clooney just happened to mention that uncut diamonds look like plain old rocks, and then there they were.
They do a great job with exposition in this movie, and doing it without you noticing things like that. I noticed that a lot watching it this time. We're like, man, they're setting shit up way before, and it really comes together. It's just a smart, clever movie like that, right? It's just kind of satisfying when you see all the pieces lock in together. I always love that experience as a moviegoer.
Yeah, we're only going to talk about Isaiah Washington because of that great "you wanted to tussle, we tussled" moment.
J-Lo's best moment, like amazing moment, just revenge moment. She knows what's coming. She knows all of her weight classes.
Yeah. Well, and what a pig this guy is. I mean, the whole thing about, you're such a good bitch. You want a bone. I mean, just, it's such a satisfying moment when she just, pulls out that weapon and just, what the fuck was that? And the fact that I know who Isaiah Washington is off screen and that he's such an asshole, it just made it even worse, The
difference between Maurice and Kenneth, they were brothers, right?
I believe so.
Yes. Is that, I was legitimately scared of Kenneth. I don't know if I would have been, Don Cheadle has the charm about him, but like Kenneth was a truly heinous person, like clearly wanted to rape Midge, clearly wanted to rape Jay, like definitely like you could see that like this guy was a bad dude.
Yeah. Women are his property.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Midge did not have J-Lo's street smarts about her and, a weapon in her bag that she could just pull out and, yuck.
Midge is all of us. All us women.
Exactly. So here's what I was going to say the opposite about. I was saying, Don Cheadle, like, we never get to see him play like this awful. I've never seen Dennis Farina play anyone this charming, I don't think. Yeah. I mean, like,
he's great.
The coolest
he was in Law & Order. So I've watched him on the later Law & Orders with Anthony Anderson, and he is also, like, a good dude. So that's actually how I know Dennis Farina. I don't know him as a bad guy.
Usually he plays, these cops that are just kind of not, I always see him playing, like, a slightly corrupt cop or kind of a cop that's so tough, they're a little scary. He was like the cuddliest teddy bear dad ever, who gives his daughter a gun because, they're both like on the good side of the law, but like that's what she wants. And all of his stuff about her fucked up relationships. And, he knows that she's having sex with, maybe a cheating husband over here, maybe a bank robber over there. He doesn't judge. He's just kind of like, I'm here when you need me, honey. Why don't you come over and watch the Super Bowl? I mean, he's just like, he is the coolest guy. I know that Clooney's in this movie and no one can hold a torch to his charisma, but like Dennis Farina came in a close second for me. Like I loved him. I kind of fell in love with him in this movie.
I agree. I totally agree. I wish he did more stuff like this. He's actually, I believe, in this world still in Get Shorty, which is also Elmore Leonard, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same kind of world. Yep. There's some world collision here, and he's in that. He's not this character, I don't think necessarily. I think he's more of a criminal in that movie, but he's extremely charming. Yeah, he's definitely a very lovable, supportive dad, like you said, not judgy, and yeah, it was fun to see him. He probably looks 24 years older though now, I'm guessing.
A little, maybe not 24. Maybe like he's probably put on 10 years in the last 24 years. And, George Clooney, if you put him side by side, this George Clooney and Ticket to Paradise George Clooney, sure, he looks older. But, a quarter century has gone by. But a lot of folks in this movie just still look great. Catherine Keener plays George Clooney's ex-wife.
I had to look her up. I did not recognize her. I knew her. I did not know her as Catherine Keener. Like, I would never, if you had put a gun to my head, I would have not been able to identify her. Yeah.
Well, that's probably, that's more the character probably than anything else, because she doesn't play anybody who's got this kind of, I mean, I'm not saying Adele's ditzy, but she kind of has a bit of a ditzy energy about her. You know, she's a magician's assistant who chain smokes and kind of, you know, wears the thigh-high boots around the, you know, I mean, she was a character, but she was a lot of fun. And, you know, I always love her no matter what she does.
She's always good.
I agree.
So she's in this. Luis Guzman, who we said, you know, who just finished playing kind of a sex symbol-ish in Wednesday. They wanted, you know, Gomez and Morticia to be, well, you know, he's opposite Catherine Zeta-Jones as Morticia. And he's playing Gomez. I hated his wig in Wednesday. He looked awful. But in this one, you could kind of see that charm. I can kind of go, okay, yeah, sex symbol, Luis Guzman, I got it. You know, and when he's being arrested, and he's just really more interested in finding out how they do the sawing the lady in half trick, because that's been on his mind for months. You know, there's some really funny shit.
There's some funny parts for sure. Yeah,
I laughed several times in this movie.
And I missed it the first time I watched it, but I'm like, oh my God, he's got a prison bitch.
Yeah.
He told that guy, I love you. And I was like, that's kind of forward for 1998. And it doesn't call attention to itself, because it totally went over my head the first time I watched this. But I was watching it this week and I'm like, oh my God. You know, with a really obviously effeminate prisoner who's like his boyfriend in prison. And maybe that's a prison only thing. And Chino swings the opposite way when he's out in the real world. But either way, wow.
Yeah. I definitely clocked that right away. I was like, oh, okay.
Here's the one that flew me for a loop. The door opened and I'm like, is that Viola Davis? Holy shit, that's Viola Davis. I mean, before she was Viola fucking Davis. Here she is as the sister of both Isaiah Washington and Don Cheadle. I buy them as a family unit, absolutely. Sure. You know, and she was, again, didn't have much to do in this movie, but sit on the couch and smoke and kind of do a little exposition with J-Lo, but so good in everything she does, always.
She's always good. Think of, what is the movie with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Meryl Streep?
Oh, Doubt.
She had one scene.
Yeah.
And just very similar to here. She had one scene and just kills it and just is amazing. She's just fully developed character as soon as she opens the door without saying a word.
Yeah. So good, always. And then finally, 2 uncredited performances.
Interesting.
If you didn't know going in, you had no idea until both Michael Keaton and Samuel L. Jackson showed up.
I had no idea.
Michael Keaton shows up as the still married, not quite separated, maybe boyfriend of J-Lo, who, as soon as you see him, it's like, dude, I love you. You're still the best Batman, but you are no George Clooney in this world. I mean, like, it just, you know.
With that FBI shirt, I was like, okay.
Oh, and I love Dennis Farina's line, "Do you ever wear one of those undercover?" And he totally doesn't get the joke. He's like, no.
Like, he's so gross.
Yeah, and he's so good because he can be sexy. Bruce Wayne in that black turtleneck in the Batcave was totally sexy, but it's like, not here. Like, he left all of that. It just turns off the energy, and it's just like, again, so derpy, just dumb.
Absolutely. Also, isn't he? He's Ray Nicolette and Jackie Brown as well. Another Elmore.
He is. Yeah, he was just the year before. He played the exact same role because Elmore Leonard does the Elmore Leonard extended universe. You know, he has people pop up in various things, and so. There was actually a whole tussle about whether or not Ray Nicolette would be allowed to appear in this movie or even be mentioned, because Miramax owned the rights to that character because Jackie Brown had just come out the year before.
I did not know that.
And Quentin Tarantino basically heard that Steven Soderbergh wanted to make this movie, and he not only said, oh, yeah, you can absolutely use this character because you should absolutely be making this movie, but I'm going to call Michael Keaton and see if he'll reprise the role. So if you watch those 2 movies back to back, yes, Michael Keaton is playing exactly the same person in both movies.
There's
That's
a lot
crazy.
A lot of connections in the world. There's a lot of like theories, like the diamonds are what's in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. I've heard a lot of things about these worlds colliding. So,
I still prefer to believe that that the briefcase contains Marcellus Wallace's soul. That's the best. Like, he sold his soul to the devil, and it's in the briefcase.
I mean, that's great.
That's still the best one.
Just a theory.
Still the very best one. And then finally, Samuel L. Jackson as Hajira Henry, who doesn't show up until the very last scene because the lady marshal wanted him to wait until the next morning for some unknown reason. Oh, by the way, he knows how to break out of every prison in the world. Mm-hmm. Maybe she figured we'd have some stuff to talk about. Very clever, very fun. You know, did give a little bit of lightness to what is ultimately kind of a tragic ending, you know, to this story. When push came to shove, J-Lo had to put her duty as a police officer and a federal marshal above the fact that she totally had the hots for George Clooney. So,
but she does it later. She does it later by giving him these little pieces to, I don't know. She knowingly, like, question, I don't know. It's a little contradictory.
She does. It is. And yeah, I mean, she couldn't kill him. And I think probably her training would have said, in fact, I've heard cops say this, you never shoot to wound. If you're going to fire your weapon, you go for the heart and try to kill somebody. I mean, that's the only, otherwise don't fire your weapon. I mean, I've heard many cops say this before. So assuming that Elmore Leonard did his research and knows this as well, the fact that she knowingly shot him in the leg, already she did not, quote unquote, do her job to the utmost.
Yeah, follow her. Yeah.
So, you know, because she said, I couldn't shoot you. And he's like, well, you did shoot me. Like, you know what I mean? Right. You know, but that's part of the whole. And so she's not going to help him escape, quote unquote. But, you know, she can't help it if he was in a van in the back of the thing with a known prison escapee and they were swapping notes the whole time. And, you know, and again, they're not going to say anything that she can hear, but hopefully he'll make a friend. Right. You know, and then they'll get back to Glades and they'll just be good buddies. Jack and Hajira.
And Samuel Jackson, and he's just being very Sam Jackson in this movie.
Yeah,
and,
totally.
And I don't know, it was a nice surprise when both of these guys pop up at the end.
And you know, I mean, it was great that it was somebody, you know, that you go and kind of pay attention to immediately.
Yes.
So stunt casting sometimes annoys me, but in this case, I thought it was, you know, the Michael Keaton thing. I was like, did you really need a Michael Keaton to play that derpy guy? But then when I found out that it's the same character he played the year before, I thought, well, that's cool. This one, I absolutely think you needed somebody that caught your attention. It was like, that's Samuel L. Jackson, right? You know, it totally works that way.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Yes, and I have a question after you.
Before we move on. What did you all think of this kind of jazzy score with the bass throughout the whole thing? Do you think it worked? Do you think it added an element to the movie that wasn't there if it wasn't there? But it's pretty much played throughout the movie as this like Wurlitzer piano and some bass. And then it gets a little jazzy sometimes, but this score has always stuck out to me as original and I don't know. I think it just adds this kind of sexy element to everything that they're doing.
I am famously the worst person to ask about a score because I'm almost ear blind to it. I'm not. It affects me in a very subconscious way. I always feel
as it should.
I always feel exactly how the composer wants me to feel, and I never notice a score. There are a couple of when it's out of place and it's crazy. We talked about the Ghost and Mrs. Muir last time, and it was supposedly this brilliant score, but like every time you get a close up, it'd be like dun dun dun, and it was annoying.
It was very distracting.
You know, so when it's distracting, I don't like it. I remember there was one movie I saw. I think another Clooney. Was it Michael Clayton where the entire score was played on a single piano? And oftentimes it was like one note at a time. It wasn't even like chords on a piano. And that was also a little distracting. But if the score is good, I know it because I didn't pay attention at all. So I just think it's a very sexy movie. And the score is probably a big reason why. But I would never have put those two things together because I'm the perfect audience for a film composer.
I didn't notice it any different because it felt to me, I watch a lot of Law and Order, and it felt very much like the kind of same sorts of scores that they use for those shows. Yeah, just very like kind of cool.
No, that's Seinfeld.
And sexy. Cool and sexy, but like these are also kind of bad guys. Yeah, like it definitely felt like that kind of genre to me.
Yeah, for sure. It's just an aspect that always stuck out to me in this film. And it's always one of the more underrated aspects, to your point, Eric, that, you know, you're not really supposed to notice it. But when horror movies make you feel a certain way, they will ramp it up or whatever. So.
Sure.
Yeah. I have a plot question. So I thought when they first get to Detroit and Steve Zahn and the bad guys are going to kill somebody, that they were going to kill Ripley. Obviously they didn't. Who did they go and kill?
Oh, that was a test. Don Cheadle basically said, I want to know that you have what it takes to actually pull off this job. So he just picked some, you know, again, this was a part that was like, oh, I thought it was so forward thinking with, you know, Luis Guzman and his little, you know, prison boyfriend. This one was a little bit of a transphobic, you know, because they found someone who was basically a trans woman they used to know in prison, and they just decided, well, let's kill that person.
But did they say that? I got very confused.
Yeah, they said it in the car. I think he may have owed him money or something. I can't remember the reason
I must have missed that.
But yeah, at the same time, someone like Kenneth or Snoopy is probably transphobic.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm just going to go ahead and guess.
That's not surprising.
I mean, yes, and I absolutely agree that you can put transphobic people in a movie and not have the movie be transphobic. But just the fact that you didn't even see this character, all you saw was the dead body when it was over, and they made such a big deal about the fact that this character was trans. I was just like, I mean, it wasn't soap dish levels of transphobia cringe, but it was like, it was a little disappointing.
Oh, see, I totally missed all of that. I did watch this movie with no distractions. So yeah, I got very confused because then I thought they were killing Ripley and I'm like, but no, you're going to get, and then for that whole time, that whole like next 20 minutes before they go to his house, I thought Ripley was dead. I mean, I saw the trans woman on the stairs, but it just didn't, I don't know.
Yeah. And it was this whole, I mean, I think that was all about the fact that Steve Zahn thought that he was the leader of this whole thing and clearly was not. And the fact that after this murder was totally shook up by this whole thing, like did not like walking into a stranger's place and ending their life. I mean, really didn't like that.
It changed him for sure.
So, you know, Romeo and Juliet, the snazzy, jazzy film noir version that this is. I was
the bass guitar version.
Yeah, I kind of was halfway through this movie and I had a thought. And then I thought, well, is that fair? That might be a little sexist. Because I was thinking to myself, wow, Karen Sisco is a really bad cop. Like, she's not. She's good at her job. But the whole idea that she's letting... But then I thought, you know what? Jack Foley is a really bad bank robber because he's totally encouraging this relationship with a U.S. federal marshal. I mean, Buddy was absolutely correct. It's like, this woman wants to shoot us. Why are you trying to date her? Like, so I just wondered, who's worse at their job, Jack Foley or Karen Sisco?
Oof.
I'm going to go Karen because she's got the law on her side.
Yeah, she did make a promise when she took that badge. I'm sure she took some oath.
Yeah, something like that. Where Jack is a loose cannon, he's a criminal. He can justify anything, right? To some degree. So I'm going to go Karen on that one.
Yeah, I mean they're both.
But the sexual tension is so much; it's hard to ignore.
I know.
I think what's interesting about these characters, I'm going to go deeper probably on this question, but I think just thinking about this right now, I think both of them are deeply unsatisfied where they are with their lives. And I think that, this is something exciting. It's something new. It's something fun in quotes. But it's basically two human beings who hate where they are in life or are not where they thought that they were going to be at this particular time in their life. So
I think there's a whole underlying theme here that they talk about to some degree about like, what if we met under different circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. And it's all about timing and what if we just met in a bar like Gary and Celeste, right? That's the whole, they're kind of playing alternate lives here. And they both struggle with it. I think Clooney more than other because he does try and go get that job with him, with Albert Brooks' character later. And he does kind of battle the normal life versus the criminal life, you know, and then we find out the opening scene of him robbing the bank was him leaving that job interview pissed off. And he's like, fuck it, I'm going to be a criminal again.
But a brilliant criminal. I mean, you know, he almost got away with that. You know what that kind of reminded me of? I'm going to spoil something else here. Have we all seen The White Lotus season 2?
Yes.
I mean, I thought it was so great how they actually let Jennifer Coolidge kill off all the bad guys. They still wanted her to die, but then she just dies in the stupidest way possible by falling off a boat after kind of being a badass action hero, you know? And it kind of reminded me of that opening scene. It's like he had no thought that he was going to rob a bank that morning. None. He saw a bank across the street. He walked in. He was like, oh, that guy with the open briefcase, I can use him. And he just does it as cool as you please. And if he hadn't flooded his gas tank, he would have gotten away.
Yeah. Well, and I felt a lot of parallels to the Leonardo DiCaprio character in Catch Me If You Can. Like, they're the same sort of, like, smart, maybe a little misaligned, maybe, you know, not reaching their potential, but they are very good criminals, and they are very smart criminals. And so, which, by the way, Catch Me, I love that. I love that movie. I can watch that movie on a loop, and I have. But yeah, so those sort of like quote unquote smart criminals. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you know, I felt a lot of the same kind of vibes.
Yeah,
and
you could see why he was cast as Danny Ocean, though, right?
Oh, yeah, it's like, absolutely,
totally.
He plays rakish really well.
So back to Jack and Karen. Do you think that danger was the attraction? The fact that they were a cop and a robber? I mean, was that part of what drew them to each other? Because I kind of wondered if they had met under different circumstances. I think she would have blown him off the same way she blew away those other doofuses in the bar.
Barf.
I mean, you know, they were gross, but he wasn't much better when he showed up as Gary. You know, his lines weren't that much more, you know, but he was already George Clooney and they'd already had that moment in the trunk, you know, so the fact that they did meet under those circumstances, I think I personally think was a lot of it. Am I nuts, or was their love just truly meant to be, do you think?
I mean, I don't know about that. But I think that we've all experienced, you know, falling for the wrong person, quote unquote, the wrong person. And that is very exciting. And I think that's why a lot of people have affairs, because, you know, it's the thrill of getting caught or the thrill of doing something naughty, or, you know, so that's certainly part of it. I mean, I think they're extremely well matched. I wish that they had met under different circumstances. Perhaps they'd be, you know, it'd be a happily ever after, even though I'm like the least romantic person on the planet. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think they probably fell in lust more than love. And
I agree.
But at the same time, it completely works. The situation made it its own. And, you know, I don't think they would have ever been quoting Network either if they didn't meet the way they did and, you know, knew those things about the movies that they're talking about. And that whole scene is the reason I think that the attraction started. But you like see him in that trunk scene and he's like, you know, going down her body with the flashlight inside of there, you know, and there's little things going on. And the only lighting inside of this scene is from the brakes, and maybe some just trunk lighting at all. It's just such a well-made scene that really believes within the first 10 seconds of them being together that, oh yeah, these two would be a perfect match, right? And so you throw them in there with the conflict of cops and robbers, and it just makes a more interesting movie. I don't know if I would say the danger necessarily is the attraction. I think they're just both really hot and see something in each other more than just the hotness.
I mean, depending on which way you were oriented, or, you know, one or the other. I mean, it's just like if you were in a trunk with either George Clooney or Jennifer Lopez,
or both.
Could you not? Yes, you know.
I mean,
either one. Yeah, you know, they are so incredibly smoking hot, and yet she couldn't shoot him at the end. She does possibly set him up with someone who's going to help him escape. You know, I mean, there does seem to be some long-term, you know, he can't let it go Well, of course, the sexual tension was still on 11 because they had not yet done anything but take a quick ride in the trunk together in a completely literal way. That was not a metaphor. But that whole, like, when they did meet in the hotel room, it's like he should have, according to his job and according to who he is, he should have tied her to the bed and made sure she couldn't do, or killed her. Or, he shouldn't have just left, and he should not have given her back her gun. That just goes against everything about being a bank robber. So I think we are supposed to believe that there is something there where they, touched souls as well as other parts of their anatomy.
The cat and mouse part is fun, though.
Sure is.
Let's talk about a trope that I hate. The first one, of course, is, pulling up and there's always a parking space in every movie. But the second one that I hate is when, like, two characters go to bed and one of them wakes up and the other person's gone. Like, I have never in my life not felt the bed move when somebody got up, not like the fact that somebody would be in such a deep sleep that they wouldn't hear somebody getting up out of a bed, like going to the bathroom, like futzing around the apartment or hotel or whatever is asinine to me. And so I just had to get that off my chest.
You just got laid by George Clooney. You're in a dream state.
I guess so. But
having never been in that enviable position, I can only say it's feasible. That's a valid possibility.
Yes, he dickmatized Jennifer Lopez. Is basically what you're saying.
Okay, you ready for some fun facts about Out of Sight?
Absolutely.
Talking about that trunk scene, Steven Soderbergh really wanted it to be one long single take. He was not going to move the camera one bit. He was going to do the whole thing in a wide shot and just do it. They shot it 45 times.
That's insane.
Because they had to do it. And they didn't use a single bit of that footage because as soon as they put it in front of a test audience, the test audience hated it.
Really?
Rough.
One long take where you're in a trunk and you have to, set the camera up so you see everything you need to see. So much of what that made that scene sexy was the hand on the skirt and then the close-up of her face. That's a terrible idea.
Rarely do I agree with the audience, but in this case, I will agree with them because, the editing of that scene made it so much sexier. And you couldn't have done that if it was this one static shot.
Yeah, and audiences hated it. It totally slowed down the movie. No one bought the love story, and the whole thing just flopped. And so
it's in the first act too, right?
Yeah.
Where you wanna get the hook in them, not make
gotta
them
establish
bored.
all that stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if this would still be the case, but back in November 2008, a full 10 years after the release of this film, Out of Sight ranked number 1 in Entertainment Weekly's list of sexiest movies ever.
I think it's still up there.
I think it would still be in the top 10. It would have to be.
What would replace it since then? I'm trying to think. 50 Shades of Grey?
Certainly not.
No, and definitely not Twilight.
No.
I'm like trying to think of sexy movies. Have I even seen any sexy movies of late? Eyes Wide Shut? No, JK.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on record and say this absolutely belongs in the top 5, no matter what. I can't think of any others.
Top 3 at least.
Yeah. Just sexy. This is my favorite fun fact that Soderbergh really thought about adding a post-credits scene to this movie featuring Glenn, Steve Zahn, in a bar telling this whole story as though he had been the central character and hero of this whole thing.
Amazing.
I kind of wish he would have done it. I think that would have been, a lovely little treat for those who stuck around. Marvel had not yet trained us to always sit through all the credits to make sure that we don't miss something. But it would have been a great little, bonus reel. For something. He also thought about doing something similar for the film's trailer, that the trailer would actually be narrated by Steve Zahn as though he were a stoned out of his gourd with a handlebar mustache criminal mastermind, when in fact you get to the movie and you see something quite different.
There is this came out in the era of DVDs, so I'm actually surprised that was not put on like an extras or something.
Well, they never shot it. They never shot it. That was his original intent.
I would see that.
His original intent was that they were going to do that. If that were out there somewhere, I would love to watch Steve Zahn kill that scene because I'm sure he would be hysterically funny.
Just let him go. Yeah.
Right. Okay, folks, it's time for a game.
Woo.
do it.
All right. This game is it's a riff on our regular Casting Couch. We're calling this one Casting Couch Time Machine. We are going to remake Out of Sight in 3 different time periods. We're going to do one in the present day. Then we're going to go back and do the other main periods that we are discussing this year in the Rewind Project. We're going to go back to 1973 this summer, and the end of this year, we're going to be headed back to 1948. So what I'd like you to do is cast Jack, Taryn, and 2 other roles using actors that were popular, or in Allie's case, are popular now in 2023. If you were making a 2023 remake of Out of Sight, who would you use? Adam, I'm going to ask you to go back to the 70s, pick out some big stars of 70s cinema that you think would be in a 70s remake of Out of Sight. And I'm going to go all the way back to the 1940s and fill out the cast from that angle. One of the things that we're always scared about on the Rewind Project is that we're going to come up with the same answers to our games. No chance of that this time around. So, Allie, if you were making a modern day remake of Out of Sight, who would you cast?
Well, first of all, thank you for giving me 2023 because I feel like I can do my best work in today. So I got my Glenn, my Karen, and my Buddy pretty quickly, but I went back and forth with my Jack because I realized that I had cast a much older Jack to my Karen, and I was like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that in this movie. So we'll start with the supporting characters first. So my Buddy is John David Washington.
Excellent.
Denzel's son.
Yeah, great.
Hashtag Nepo Baby.
Hashtag Nepo
I'm so
baby.
sick of that conversation. I'm so done with talking about Nepo babies. I'm just going to say that. John David Washington's a great actor. Cast him in everything. End of story.
Whatever. I don't give a shit about that.
He's amazing.
And then my Glenn is going to be Tom Holland.
Okay.
Because once again, when you see it on Twitter, you have to retweet it. I didn't because it was a shortened clip, but I was watching him again as Rihanna and Umbrella for Lip Sync Challenge, and he's just so good. And I just feel like he doesn't really get to play the sort of like super goofy roles. And I feel like he kind of has that like loose-limbed look and feel about him like Steve Zahn does. So, and it's going to make sense because I have cast Zendaya, his girlfriend, as my Karen.
Oh, okay. Well, that's going to make a different kind of sense. I mean, hopefully they don't have too much chemistry.
No. I mean, a lot of real life couples don't have great chemistry on screen. I mean, they played against each other before, but I thought, again, also not casting him as the leading man. So then I went back and forth with my Jack. And then I typed in young, sexy actors, literally into Google. And this person came up, might be a little controversial, but my Jack is going to be Harry Styles.
Not controversial for me at all.
No.
Harry Styles is a perfectly, amiable gentleman as far as I can tell. And I thought he was great in Don't Worry, Darling. That it wasn't a perfect movie, but
it was not a perfect movie.
He was that perfect.
He's charismatic.
He was very charismatic, and he was that cover boy that he was supposed to be. And and he was great. He was fine.
And I'd like to see Harry Styles and Zendaya kind of bounce off of each other. Literally.
My only controversy with this is all of those actors outside of Washington are all pretty young to be seasoned criminals and in prison, served in prison, and trying to get on the task force in FBI. But other than that, I love the choice. Yeah,
I skewed a little younger just because I wanted to give the young folks a good. But you're probably right. But maybe they're a little bit more baby criminals.
Zendaya just got her, her badge, right? You could actually start this movie with the last scene of Silence of the Lambs, right? Where, Jodie Foster is just graduating from the academy, So she's a little green, which is why she ends up in the trunk, and Harry Styles has done one stint in jail. Maybe he hasn't robbed more banks than anybody in America. But, maybe he's got 30 under his belt. He's robbed more banks than any other 25-year-old.
There you go.
We'll stretch it out a little bit.
We can make it work. We can make it all work.
A lot of sexy, though.
All right, Adam, we're going back to the 70s for a 70s remake of Out of Sight. Who are we putting in this one?
Okay, yeah, this was tough, just looking at this era of actors. Jack honestly was the toughest one. The other ones were somewhat easy for me, but Jack was my toughest one. And really, to me, it came down to who's the best looking one out of these three actors. And I may get some pushback off of this, but I'm actually going to start with Maurice and Snoopy. That was one of my characters, and I actually think Jack Nicholson would be an amazing Maurice.
Cosign, yeah.
Totally.
And I have another reason for that later when I tell you my Jack, but I think he would be an amazing Maurice. I have Richard Pryor as Glenn. Being the stoner in the car, being pissed off and just like venting in the car to the FBI agent. Just not really,
for Richard, because he never got to make like a straight up action movie before, but that would absolutely play to his strengths and put him in this kind of movie. That's brilliant.
So I thought he would play a great Glenn. This one may be a little obvious, but Faye Dunaway as Karen.
Of course.
Love it.
Who
He
else
has
could
to be,
you
right?
put? Yes. And of course, they would
Okay.
have to go through Katharine Hepburn's filmography in the trunk of the car.
Exactly. So that one was probably my most obvious one. And then Jack came down to three people. And to me,
I
it
have a
came down
definite 70s Jack, so I'm just curious to see if you made the same choice I did.
Excellent. All right. So my three were Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford, and the one I went with, Robert Redford. Now, for a couple of reasons. One, him and Jack Nicholson have never done a movie together, I don't believe. So I would love to see the two of them be kind of pals in a movie. I think that would be amazing. And they talked about 3 Days of the Condor in the trunk. So we got to get Faye Dunaway and Robert Redford back to it again. So I'm going Robert Redford.
Okay, that was not my 70s, which I thought was a completely obvious 70s Jack. For me, would have been Paul Newman.
That's why I was chosen. Yeah.
You know, Paul Newman I think which one oozes. Robert Redford is a beautiful man, and he's probably more attractive, but Paul Newman is just unquantifiably sexier to me.
For sure. Yeah. And I definitely considered him, but ended up landing on Robert Redford.
Redford is an absolutely solid choice to play Jack Foley and get stuck in a trunk with.
I've also seen Redford basically play this exact same character in Old Man and the Gun. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie from a few years ago, but he basically plays the older version of the guy who robs a bank without a gun, and he's just nice and charming. I think that also had me leaning a little bit more that way. So he's actually played this character to a T before, so I couldn't believe it. You know, Clint Eastwood, Harrison Ford, some Star Wars fans may think he's sexier than Redford here, but I don't know. Paul Newman was definitely up there with me as well. So
funny. You said Harrison Ford. I'm like, he wasn't from the 70s, not really, and he absolutely was. I mean,
totally.
You know, Star Wars was that,
and
was
probably
that was
his sexiest. Yeah.
Oh, Allie would disagree with you on that.
No, his sexiest is Working Girl. I feel very strongly about that. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm taking us back to the 40s. I'm actually going to start with Jack and Karen because, I'll do what you guys did. So I'm going to start. I actually couldn't resist. I had to cast three other roles using some pretty, minor actors, but ones that I love. I also cast Glenn. My Glenn was S.Z. Zakal. Who was in both Casablanca and Christmas in Connecticut. He was the guy in Christmas in Connecticut. He was the chef who was like, everything is hunky dunky. I mean, he's kind he's kind older as Glenn. But I mean, if you were making a 40s film about a bunch of hardened criminals, I mean, he would be just the doofus from the jail. And nobody is doofusy, although he does have a lot of dignity in Casablanca and plays someone who's easy to kind of laugh with, but you never laugh at him in that movie. But I would just ask him to be just full on derp in this one, and I think he'd do a great job. My Adele would be an actress who never made it to being a household name, but her name is Demi Moore. And if you've ever seen 1939's The Women, she plays the nail tech who first blurts out the fact that Norma Shearer's husband is having an affair. And she's just got this really squeaky voice. And so it's that kind of, I think she'd be a perfect magician assistant who is running around her apartment with a rabbit and a cigarette. She'd be brilliant at that. Buddy, I tell you what, there weren't a lot of black actors in the 40s, and it kind of made me think, am I going to have to just do an all-white cast here? But I thought, no, Paul Robeson was well-known enough that I thought, and he would be a great buddy. He would just have and I think he and my Jack would have a good rapport on screen as well. And then finally, I didn't think I'd be able to cast a Latina Karen, and I wrote down what I kind of thought was what I was going to do, and then I went, wait a minute, I actually did cast a Latina Karen, because this is a woman who changed her name to become a Hollywood star. And so my Jack is obviously Cary Grant, because who else in the 40s kind of has that charisma and that immediate sexiness.
I thought you were going to pick John Garfield.
Oh, well, John Garfield is like my personal, ex-husband in a previous life. But no, Cary Grant's Cary Grant's the be-all, end-all of this kind of character, I think. And then for my Karen, I was like, who is sexy as hell? And actually, Latina to boot, Rita Hayworth.
My fave.
Yeah, the two of them made one movie together. She actually played Judy when Cary Grant said Judy. But I think I'd put them back together again. And I think Cary Grant and Rita Hayworth in the trunk of a car would probably rival George and J-Lo for, the amount of sex appeal that could potentially generate. So,
did you consider Bogart at all?
No, he's
too old.
He doesn't he doesn't ring my bell in terms of like sex appeal at all. Mm-hmm. Like, I get that in Casablanca he's like, I buy the love story between him and Ingrid Bergman, absolutely, which part of me says I shouldn't, because they just look so odd together. I just never understood why Humphrey Bogart was a sex symbol. I get that he's cool, but yeah, him versus Cary Grant, there was like absolutely no contest for me.
No doubt. From a looks perspective, absolutely.
Well, and just sex appeal. I mean, just, who would I rather be caught, trapped in a trunk with? No question. So I'm just going to go on record and say I would see any of these versions of this movie. I would love to see all 4 versions of this one. I just, a really, really solid film. I'm projecting a little bit because we're about to wrap up with the way we usually end all of our episodes here, with a skip, rent, or buy. If you've never listened to the Rewind Project before, skip means, Eric, why did you make me watch this? I wanted to tear my eyes out. You owe me 2 hours of my life back. Rent means, I'm happy that I saw it, or it was good, but I really don't ever need to see this movie again. Buy means if somebody said, hey, what about Out of Sight? You would absolutely sit down and watch this movie again, because it holds up and it's just a lot of fun. And why not? What a perfect way to spend a rainy afternoon. So we usually start with our guests. So Adam, we're going to make you go first here. Are you a skip, rent, or a buy?
Absolutely buy. I actually physically own this movie and have bought it, so I am going for it. It's just one of those that is completely rewatchable. Like you said, rainy day movie. Yes, like you describing that situation, I'm like, if we were still in the days of flipping through channels and this popped on, I absolutely would stop and watch it, especially if it was on the trunk scene or the restaurant scene. I think the chemistry here in this movie is 75% of what's so fun about it and appealing. I think the structure of the movie, how it's told, the cool criminal aspect to it is extremely appealing to me. The ensemble cast, it's just there's very few weak points to this movie, so absolute buy for me.
Okay, Allie, where are you?
I am a solid rent. I had never seen this movie before. I was excited about it, and I'm excited that my excitement was justified. I enjoyed it. It was super fun. I loved everybody in it. I love a caper movie. I love a little rat-a-tat-tat. So yeah, I'm definitely a solid rent. Don't know if I'd watch it again, but it was absolute delight to watch it for this podcast.
Yeah, I am option 4. I'm along with Adam. Already bought it. This was actually when I watched it late last year. It was on sale for iTunes for $4.99. And I was just like, how bad could it be for $5? I bet it's pretty good. And I'm actually really happy that I just laid down the $5 and I own it and I can watch it whenever I want to. And, I just saw it. Am I going to watch it this month? Probably not. But if anybody says, oh, you talked about Out of Sight, is it any good? I've never seen it. I'd be like, sit down. We're watching it. Over. We're doing it right now because it's a great film. Adam, thank you so much.
Thank you
for spending an hour and 20 minutes with us this morning talking about a really, really fun movie.
Yeah, it was absolutely my pleasure. You guys are great. Thank you so much for having me.
Come back anytime.
We will be back next week with Ian McKellen and Brendan Fraser and the amazing Lynn Redgrave in Gods and Monsters, the true story of James Whale. True-ish, inspired by the life of James Whale, who directed Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. So it's a Hollywood movie. It's a gay movie.
Meta.
It's a let's watch Brendan Fraser garden in a really tight tank top movie. It's
really?
all
That's
of those
in it?
things. Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
It's very sexy.
We're all here for it. We're all here for it. Please join us next week for Gods and Monsters. We will see you then. Until then, I am Eric.
I'm Allie.
Be kind. Rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.
You just got laid by George Clooney. You're in a dream state.